Welcome, friends, to yet another book club, Sanctuary Online. We are so excited to bring this conversation to you. And interestingly enough, as we move into the summer, we're still doing book club every month, but other people have had some other activities pop up in their lives. And I need to read you a couple apologies that I think are just funny as heck. So I know Jane Ann would love to be here tonight. And she said, here's from Jane Ann. I finished reading Anthem. As my characters were being knocked off, I lost interest. I only had about 8 chapters left before I just had to return the book. She gets them from the library. Unfortunately, as I'm volunteering for the Canadian Open this week, at the golf course is Tuesday, late afternoon for dinner and the final training. So she is doing something wonderful fun in Toronto. And she said, Tuesdays are turning out to be a bit crazy for me. So I'm glad you're on a summer schedule. Even that, I'll be pressed because it's always something. And yet she sends love to all the folks for the book conversation tonight. So that's from Jane Ann. And then from Janice. Janice sent in, I feel like, anyway, Janice said, I want you to know that I'll not be joining Sanctuary for the next 10 weeks. My church in Georgetown is doing an online study that I need to attend on Tuesdays at 7. I will join you again as soon as the study has completed, but it starts tonight. She said, I'll be listening to the recorded session of Sanctuary so I can keep up with everything. And as well, if I have questions, I will call or message you. She's so good. I love you all dearly, and we'll be back after the study is over. Please go ahead and send me the links and all the information you send to the group. Thanks for understanding. Oh yeah, I read Anthem, and all I can say is, wow. When that happens, I hope I have passed out of this life and been reincarnated in Canada or Sweden or somewhere more peaceable.
Well, I think we just finished our conversation, right? That was good. For it.
Not quite a spoiler, but and then I know Edie and Mandy are getting ready for a double graduation party. It's actually going to be hosted by Sanctuary in the Woods, not Sanctuary Online, but we're excited to be prepping all the property. They're going to have a massive pool party with 40 or 50 kids out here. You can begin to pray for us now and all the way. Okay. And yeah, Bud and Dale, if you want to go over for some, hot dogs and whatever else they have and just jump in the pool, look like a teenage boy, probably good to go. The gates will be open and but no peeing in the pool or in the house. Oh. I know. We're prepping it all, man. But then they're also, Edie and Mandy are moving from here in Austin out to Colorado Springs, that area. So they are right up to here with things. Cheryl, did Edie send you some comments though on the book?
Yes, she did. She said she read most of the book, but she had forgotten that they had a graduation event for Zach called Senior Salute, so she wouldn't be able to come. She says, I loved the book as a representation of our current historical circumstances. She is so eloquent,
I know.
It is, of course, chilling that it dealt with mass shooting and the deaths of children. Yikes. As a form of stark satire, it lays out the ridiculousness and danger of our divisive American squabbles.
Oh,
right?
That's for sure.
Yeah. Nice.
So those 3 would fill out our square tonight, but I'm glad each of you are here. And Cheryl, I'm going to hand this over into your capable hands. So enjoy the conversation. I know Barb and I, who've never read one of these books, will.
And Carol, who didn't read it.
That's all right, Carol.
All right. Well, I could start with some basics. I'm just going to start at the very beginning of the book because like the first chapter of the book was, just a thing in itself, So here it was how the book starts. In our time, in our current culture even, a suicide epidemic, teenage suicide epidemic, and everyone wondering what from, And so what were your thoughts when you read that chapter, that opening chapter?
Well, it was chaos. And I have to say, when I'm in 3 book clubs and I read all the time and enjoy it very, very much. This book, though, even that I had to slog and push myself through it, sorting out who'd been killed and what was happening. And I, at the bottom of my Kindle, it shows how much you've read, you know? And I remember glancing down and it only said 20%. And I thought, oh my goodness, I got 80% of this to go on through. And it didn't get any better. And then I finally finished it 2 days ago. And then yesterday I started on this book called Lost and Found. And I glanced down to give you an idea of the difference. And I was 40% after a couple hours yesterday afternoon. So it's just that this book was so hard to sort out, and the violence, and you know, it was just so hard for me. And yet we know that it's all possible and all real. And then in the middle of my reading it, we had that shooting down there where you all are. And it was like,
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
This is real life.
Yes. I know Ken and I were talking about it a little bit, you know, at dinner, and that was part of the thing, is that this stuff is so, I mean, I think one of the reasons why it's so depressing and stuff is because it could happen where we're at right now. It seems very, very, you know, realistic, you know, almost, right? Anyway.
I think let's see, where do I want to go with this? Some of my, you know, initial thoughts, and I was thinking about, you know, the way things go viral on the internet among young people.
Yes.
And, you know, some wacky stories from the last couple of years of like eating Tide Pods. But then, you know, there was not too long ago either, and I honestly don't remember if this happened in real life or some TV show I was watching, but it popped into my head. But I think it might have been SVU. Some kids like on the internet daring each other to choke themselves to get high, to like pass out and then come back again. I think it did happen in real life and it was made on a TV show. But like these kinds of trends, or just risky things to do, and then it turns out, and I think one of the things I did not like about the book is that it never circled back and explained how this idea went viral. Was it a joke that somebody took the wrong way? Was it a movement to try to get kids to kill themselves? Was it meant to be a statement, or was it meant to be an attack? And the book never answered those questions. And I think that that's critical to the story. And so, you know, my first thoughts were like, I actually started off the book thinking like, these are amazing ideas that are coming out. And I was reading and reading and reading, like, I can't wait to see where this is going to go. And I was interested in how everything was going to get tied together. And the further I went, the more I was like, okay, now I'm like 80% in, 0 answers. Are they coming?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I found the book very hard to read.
oh.
I read it. It took me at least twice as long to read this book as it would usually take me to read a book this size, because I just had to read so slowly, you know, to be sure that I was getting everything. About halfway through, I realized, I'm sure all of you are readers, and so you're familiar with the term Romana clef, which is when a writer writes about real people and real experiences and real events, but uses artificial names to disguise that. That's a Romana clef. You know, people like Truman Capote and people like that were famous for their Romana clef writing. And that's what this is. The God King is clearly Trump. The Wizard is clearly Harvey Weinstein. Astrid, his assistant, is clearly Ghislaine Maxwell, who was the woman who was his accomplice in all of this. All the way through the book, he just barely disguises events and people who really exist to show us we're already there. You know, it's not, we are right there now. It's not like this is impossible. It's actually happening all around us right now. And I kept trying to figure out how he was going to end this thing. And then I got to the end and realized he couldn't figure it out either.
Exactly.
Yeah, his daughter kept asking him, how's it going to end? And he kept saying, I don't know. And it's the strangest ending to a book I've ever read, I think, because it doesn't really end. It didn't, and I think that was intentional on his part, or it just became inevitable that this kind of thing doesn't end. You can't end it.
I
But
felt
don't-
like, and I think when I thought book club was last week, I sent Cheryl an email, and I felt like to some extent, some of those topics are too current, like we're still in them. The real life event hasn't ended yet. And so I finished this book feeling like, this man, this author, I don't remember his name, almost needed an exercise in expression, and then was like, well, we'll just send them off to start their own little commune in the middle of nowhere, and that'll be a good way to end the book. And I was like, cop out for all the reasons you just said, Ken.
I think he wrote it. I don't know, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think he wrote it like a TV series, like Designated Survivor or anything like that could keep on going. So once they get to Alaska, what the hell's going to happen next? So
Yeah.
To me, it was like a TV series. And I need to know, what is A11? What was A11? I couldn't figure that out.
Oh, they told you at one point.
I know, but I couldn't. I read it and reread it. And
All
what was it?
alone,
Huh?
all alone, right?
Yeah. If you write out the second one, so if you write
A,
numeral 1, and then ONE for the second one,
right.
and then you pretend that the digital one was an L, then it's alone. But that's such a stretch. This is what I'm saying. They didn't talk about like how it started, and that bothers
No.
me to no end.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of interesting at the end when Simon said, it was right at the very end, he says, I figured it out. The suicides are because they're grieving their own deaths. We are grieving our own deaths. And I thought that was kind of interesting. They're grieving their own deaths, whether their deaths have already occurred or going to occur. They know it's going to occur because of everything that's been going on with everything, with all the other stuff. The
The
prophet
kind
kind
of underlying theme that for the children is hopelessness. Where
Exactly.
does hope come from? And when you look at the adults in your life, particularly your parents, and you see that their lives are total hypocrisy,
Yes.
and that they are totally shallow and valueless, then you don't want to go there. You just don't want to go there. And so there's a kind of despair and hopelessness that settles in. When teenagers kill themselves, it's almost always about hopelessness.
Yeah. And what about Claire? She seemed a bit unique. She didn't seem like she was part of the standard suicide epidemic. What did y'all think about her presentation?
You mean story?
Claire was Simon's sister, right?
She's Simon's sister, yes, and
Mhm.
I just sneeze.
her suicide, basically.
I couldn't figure that one out.
I couldn't either. I couldn't figure out why.
I think that was a very teenage act. I think she killed herself to punish her parents. I think she
That's
killed
what I
herself.
felt.
I think she living in this, and then there's flashbacks of like Simon saying like events that he and Claire were both at where like their family was attacked as things came out. And again, to Ken's point, all these like thinly veiled real life events, right? The backlash against the family that owned and manufactured, I guess, Oxy, and everything. But I never heard of that family being attacked in any way or even having teenage children. So I don't know how much of that is fiction, but yeah, that's Cheryl, you're the same, that she killed herself to punish her parents was my.
Yeah. I thought it was both to punish her parents and hopelessness, but
Yeah,
hopelessness in a very weird way. And she felt like they were, like you said, Ken, so much hypocrisy and so much lack of care about anybody else.
There is
you know?
a
So,
there's a kind of a summary statement on the top of page 162 that helped me kind of, this is from the kid they called the prophet, who
right,
is
Paul, yeah,
Yeah. He says, our parents have surrendered. They can't or won't commit to creating a collective system based on sharing, based on the idea that every human life is precious, that we can't sacrifice any of God's children in the name of progress. They can't or won't agree that we are stronger together and that diversity strengthens the species. That power without empathy is sin. And if all of those kids believed that about their parents
Yes.
and about the adults and leaders in their lives, then that's the closest I think they come to explaining this
Yeah.
rash of suicides. It was kids just giving up because their parents had given up.
yeah. The author seemed to use the prophet to speak a lot of, and in addition to doing it himself, obviously, he just stops in the middle of the book and starts, here I am, I'm sorry I created this world, I mean, but he also uses the prophet to speak that way, through him a lot. Some of the things that you were saying, Ken, and some of the other things, even towards the end, he's speaking of, we need to get to a place of utopia and so on and so forth. So that was what ended up happening, as he was prophetic about it, So,
Wait, Cheryl, just one other thing about the suicides and the hopelessness and them all seeing their parents. And this is again where I was like, well, you didn't get questions answered. I feel like certainly maybe that was the start of it, but then there's I can't remember his name now, the judge's son, when she's like giving her testimony and whatnot, and he's back at the hotel and his dad sees he tried to slit his wrists and he starts crying. He's like, oh, I couldn't do it. And then the dad looks at his phone and sees like the group message and everyone's like A11. And it was this, like, that boy did not have hopelessness. That boy tried to kill himself because all of his friends killed themselves.
right.
And then they're like, oh my gosh. And again, that like this major thing happens and it's just dropped on you. And then it's never mentioned again in the rest of the book. And that's, I think, where I was like, well, if there is this deep hopelessness and this viral communication and all of these other things going on, I felt like the author had like 37,000 great ideas and just missed some stitches in putting them together.
Or maybe did it deliberately.
Well, and right, and that's
I think he wanted
shooting.
to
I was
say-
talking to a friend of mine, and I'm younger than a lot of you guys are by a little bit, but I graduated high school in 94 and Columbine was what, 98, 99.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of my friends and I were talking. I didn't have to worry about school shootings. It wasn't a thought. And then, I was like just out of college when all of a sudden this high school gets shot up. And I don't think the world has ever been the same again. And I think it's maybe, to that point, one of the questions is, are all of these how many of them are copycats and how many of them do have a deeply rooted issue? I mean, obviously they all have some kind of an issue, but it is a little bit of both, right? Like,
Yes.
the people who have a problem in and of itself, and then some exasperation, maybe it gets exasperated by social media, by viral ideas that go out there.
Do you think of, I can't remember if it was George Orwell's book or one of those that talked about how you don't have a little support center, like there's your family and your friends in your town aren't there anymore. Like, so many parents are so busy working that the kids don't, I mean, like, I wonder, did anyone even know what that kid that just shot up the school was going through, like, did any of his family know? Like, why was he upset? Like, no one seems to even be able to say on TV, And he was in a little town where he should have been connected, but
Yeah,
maybe he wasn't connected, you know? We're so,
or the wrong connections, right? Not real deep connections. I think that's it. So many superficial connections and not,
well, there hasn't been anyone. Usually there's some people that come and go, I knew him and he seemed normal, or I knew him, he did seem upset, you know, but nobody even come up and say I knew him. You know, so it surprised me as the whole.
Well,
but
all
the
I know is
world
that
seems like that's
they
what's
kept
wrong right
saying,
now.
that they kept saying that he is 18, he just turned 18, but that he was no longer a student at the high school and he had not graduated. So that told me something right there. He was high school
They said he
dropout.
was bullied, that he had a history of being bullied. I
Okay,
never heard why, but they said he had a history of being bullied.
okay. Well, he wasn't in school anymore, so that's right
Right.
there, an
He dropped
indication.
out.
And they say they're going to try to do something about that bullying, but as soon as you report any bullying, our experience happened, all the school wants to do is protect themselves. And so
Mhm.
the investigation, everything that happens is done with the eye of protecting the school. And so they're not solving the problem. So it feels like, I don't know about y'all, but my husband grew up in this area and I have been so shocked how many people he knows that committed suicide. I mean, I don't think anyone I know committed suicide. Well, Sissy, our cousin's sister or mother or somebody did. That's the only one that I ever knew. Do y'all know a lot of people?
I've known a lot of people. I've buried probably at least 20 people who committed suicide.
Hmm.
There was much
Mostly
more
gay,
prevalent back.
Ken?
Yes, it was
Yes.
much more prevalent in the LGBTQ community back in the 70s and 80s, I think, than it is now.
Yes,
But when I was pastor in Chicago, I think I buried probably close to 10 young people who committed suicide that I knew then. Cynthia, you knew some of the
yes, I
people
did.
in our church there who committed suicide.
One of them was your good friend, but I've forgotten his name. The jet black haired guy in the choir. He was a
Yeah.
good friend of you and Tom's.
Yeah.
And again, we never suspected that he felt, isolated like that.
His name was Ed Kolajajic.
Yes, Ed Kolajajic. So, yeah, I've known several too that, and then as you get older, you find people, it doesn't even always come out that as they age, they're very unhappy. So they just find a way to die. And I've had a little more of that lately in my life. In other words, sometimes they don't even diagnose it as suicide, but it is. They stop taking their meds, or they take too many meds or whatever. They're just done. And I'll tell you, this COVID isolation has been hard on a lot of people that I know. Thank goodness for Zooms and things like that, because otherwise it's been very isolating.
I thought another really important thing that he, again, as you say, Kristen, he introduces a lot of things,
Yes.
And one of the things that he introduces and that keeps coming up in the book is, how do you get to a place where Trump could be elected president of the United States? How could that happen? And he talks a lot about, the guy who just shot up the supermarket in Buffalo 3
Right.
weeks ago. He wrote a whole treatise on what's being called the Great Replacement Conspiracy Theory, the idea that white people are intentionally being moved out of positions of power, and that people of color are intentionally being brought into this country to take over. And it's called the Great Replacement Theory. And he really believed in that. And there's quite a bit of that in this book as well. There's a whole section in there where they talk about white people's fear of people of color. And so how do people get to the place where we can be gullible and we can believe all these crazy conspiracy theories and
Mhm.
all of that. And again, at some point, I can't remember where it is in the book, but at some point they're talking about that. And the prophet, Paul, says, we are teetering between science and magic, and most Americans believe more in magic than they do in science.
Oh,
And so I think we have to go back to looking at our educational system and just the whole, our values. And there's just something has happened in this country. Like when I was, your age, Kristen, it would have been impossible for a person like Donald Trump to be elected president. That could never, ever have happened, ever have happened.
Candidacy would have never been taken seriously.
No,
And I didn't
absolutely
think it
not.
would when he first announced.
And the Republican Party, they
Would
would
not have
never
stood
have
right.
allowed a man like him, into their ranks.
Right.
And now he owns it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
one thing I thought of is that there was starting a slide down. That's not the right word. When Bill Clinton, people accepted what he did and decided he's still okay as the head of our country, I mean, I think that they have to have morals. No, I don't want a leader who doesn't have any morals.
But weren't there stories of like Kennedy?
Sure.
oh,
Yeah.
big
And
time.
people just separated it. It was just
Big time.
separated, like I don't think that was new.
I
But I
guess
think
I
the
didn't
media
hear
attention that
that,
it got. I remember having this conversation with my mom. She's like, there were always rumors about Kennedy, but it wasn't covered by the mainstream media. It was on the side. And with Bill Clinton, it became the story.
I just in recent years knew about Kennedy, but I guess I'm like,
Well, I read a book written by a woman. It was an interesting book that she was a young girl and in college and was invited to go work at the White House. And she went upstairs with Kennedy and sex was expected. And she just thought that was, okay. And only when she got engaged as a junior in college and her soon to be husband found out about it is when the first time that she realized, oh my goodness, this is not what you do if you work for the president. But she wrote a whole book about it. And so it was very real. You know what I mean? It was, and all these other women were swirling around that he had to go in the swimming pool every night for his back. So after that is when he'd go upstairs with some of the women. So, and Jackie was, always living on the farm in Virginia. So she was the kind of person did her own thing. So yeah, I think it's been going on a lot longer than we think, but it was just became more public with Clinton.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, like the wizard in this book is clearly supposed to be Weinstein, whatever his name is.
Epstein.
Oh,
Thank
yes. Oh,
Weinstein.
yeah.
But I think that's not, unfortunately, that's a lot with when the Me Too movement came about, is uncovering that there was an awful lot of rich and powerful men who feel and act to some extent like it's their privilege and their right
Right.
to have access to women and to young women.
and what's so scary to me is I was totally oblivious to that. Like even women who said that they were held down or held back or whatever, I never noticed it. And if any man tried to do that to me, I never noticed. I mean, I just didn't notice it, and so the whole thing floored me when I found out how common that was. It was scary, and it makes you wonder what else is going on that we don't know about.
Yeah.
But can we go back to the science and magic bit? Because Cheryl, I think that was like a thing in the book too that was like under my skin with the whole prophet prophesizing.
Of my word.
And I'm like, was he supposed to actually be mad? Like, but it didn't feel like there was really a religious overtone to the book.
No,
What
you're
everyone else
right. I mean, that he was prophetic, and a lot of the things that he had, it was like he had this access to different kinds of information because of who he was. I mean, he wasn't, I don't know. I believe that certain people do have access like that to certain kinds of information if they you know, if they develop their minds or their spirit or whatever it is a certain way, that has been very spiritual, or it has been even secular, you know, you've seen that before. But it's
I
interesting
think it's
to me.
another thing. It's
Go ahead.
it's another idea that he flirts with in the
Yes.
book, that certain people may have supernatural powers of some kind.
Yes.
You know, there's several times where somebody knows something that there's no way for them to know it.
Right.
You know, and so he flirts with the idea that there may really be people with precognitive, you know, abilities. And even toward the end there, when he talks about the witches and, you know, that kind of thing, he definitely flirts with some supernatural stuff in this book.
You know, it was interesting to me because he was trying to, you know, we've had the age of reason and the age of this, but he put this and he called it the age of inverted reality, or the age of tribal thinking, you know.
Or alternative facts.
Yes. So yeah, and he had a new word, contronyms. You remember that? Contronyms? Words that mean both one thing and its opposite.
Mhm.
Aren't we familiar with that? You know, and also, I don't know how you say this word, kafabe or kayfabe or whatever it is by the professional wrestlings in 1980s, the thing we all know is fake that we agree to call real. Kafabe. You
I
know?
love that. I had a
I
great
mean-
uncle who swore it was real, and it was like one of those Thanksgiving table debates with my cousins trying to tell him it was fake, and he didn't believe it was fake
Yeah.
when the WWE wrestling was first out.
But sometimes it's like we know it's fake, but we agree to call it real. And that's what they did in the professional wrestling, right?
Yeah.
They
Yes.
knew it was fake, but they agreed to call it real. And
Is that like the
And-
definition of the Kardashians today? Like,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
like
yeah.
right? I mean, they're real people, but come on, how much of their show could?
But it almost seems like that's what goes on in our world. I mean, you can't tell me that a lot of these folks, some of the Republicans, that they don't know what's really going on. They just, you know,
Mhm.
they're just
And then
agreeing.
there's the inverse of that, which is things that are real that people refuse to believe.
Right. They agree to call it fake. Yeah.
Yes, my maternal grandfather, my mother's father, was 12 years old when the Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk, and he lived to see the moon landing.
Wow.
Whoa.
And so he could not comprehend both of those things in his one lifetime. And so he went to his grave believing that the moon landing was fake. It was done in the desert in Arizona. You know, he
Wow.
was a totally uneducated man. He had no education at all, not even first grade. But in his mind, and he had never been to Arizona. He was probably never more than 100 miles from the place he was born in his entire life. That's how
Wow.
parochially he lived.
Wow.
But he just could not accept that. And so somewhere somebody said, you know, the moon landing was faked in the desert in Arizona. And so he just repeated that over and over and over again. Oh, they never landed on the moon. That was faked in the desert in Arizona. He'd never been to Arizona, never seen a desert, but he just could not believe that something that was real was actually real.
Yeah. And
That's
we
what's
live in,
happening with a
we
lot
live
of
in that
people right
reality
now.
right now, Ken.
Absolutely. We've got people who are watching these politicians stand up and lie their heads off, but they just cannot believe that it's not the truth. They
Well,
just
sure.
won't accept that it's not.
Yeah.
the
Isn't
truth.
that the whole debate on the whole January 6th? I mean, we had mobs of people
Yep.
go to our American
right.
Capitol swearing that the election was stolen.
Well, when, it reminds me of when we had the war, I think it was with Iraq. I can't even remember, but I remember the leader of that country would get on TV and go, "They're not bombing us. What are you talking about? We're fine. We have no issues with them.
Isn't that happening right now with the Russian media? No,
Sure
we're
it
not,
is.
we're not attacking Ukraine. We're not bombing hospitals.
Yeah.
It's not that bad. It's just like
I think it's happening a lot. Trump did that a lot. I think he just would say whatever he wanted and make you believe it, make people believe it. They would believe because he's the president. He had to said something true.
Well, we talk a lot about how at our dinner about how all somebody has to do is say just the one little thing that becomes a soundbite that can go on to Fox News, and then that's it. You know, it doesn't have to be real or anything else, but you know, that thing, it becomes the truth, you know, no matter what. I also was, you know, taken by this whole thing. It never occurred to me to think of it this way, but he mentioned Michelle Obama's 2019 speech about what we need is more empathy. There's a lack of empathy in our world and so on. And then he started talking about empathy and what happens to empathy on when we are empathetic and when we no longer can be, right? That we become so accustomed to what's happening that we lose that empathy, and we almost, maybe because we can't do anything about it, become more apathetic, right? About the whole thing. It was a very sad thing for me to realize that how true that is, at least for me, you know, that I do that, you know. I mean, I think about just even the situation with Ukraine. How many things, at the beginning, you know, we were all over, oh my God, this is, oh, how horrible this is. And look at all these people and stuff. And now I assume it's still, you know, all this stuff is still going on. And now it's become so commonplace. It's not even at the forefront of our minds anymore, right? And
or in the headlines.
yeah, true. Yeah. I mean, it's and what was he saying? He was saying that empathy by itself can't really do much. I don't
But
know.
it does feel hopeless, like you can't do anything. Like I just want, like why won't we give them weapons so that they can do to Russia what Russia's doing to them? We won't give them those long range weapons. Why? You know, I finally understood about the airspace, because then we'd have to get into the war because they violated what we said was the rule. But why can't we give them weapons where they can? I mean, I think Russia should have to pay for everything. I don't know. Don't get me going on that. I'm sorry. That really upsets me. It does me. It's like so much useless destruction.
Yeah. Well, and isn't that this whole thing in this book is how much useless destruction there is, and yet, you know, people were thriving on it in certain ways. You know, it was. Let me ask you a question. Is this a book you would recommend to other people? And if so, who would you recommend it to? And why? No,
I wouldn't.
you wouldn't?
No, I think it's too hard to plow through it for an understanding of what. I'm still not sure what we were supposed to understand. I mean, except some of those ideas about the future and the hopelessness. I thought Ken made a good point about they're explaining the hopelessness of young people today, and that's for sure. But other than that, no, talk about it's a jumble. It's a jumble to me.
Yeah.
It did seem to me like he wanted to make a statement about what's going on in the world, but he didn't know how to do it. And he wanted to do it in a novel. But what he really wanted to do was like, what I want to do is just rant about it, you know? So he tried to make it into a novel.
I think I like when Ken said about one of the ideas, like he flirted with it. And that's what I feel like he flirted with a lot of ideas, or maybe like you just said, Kelly, like he ranted. And I liked the like analogies he used. I like the way he presented things in the beginning. I honestly got halfway in the book thinking I like where this is going. And then it was just on the end. I just felt like he didn't actually ever make a point, didn't explain where things were going, didn't tie it up well. And the kids go off to start afresh, but you don't hear what happened to the rest of the United States, right? Because he's only talking about the United States of America. It doesn't even talk about what's going on in the rest of the country. Well, it does start to go worldwide with the suicides. So
Yes.
you're like, yeah, so they just say it just goes worldwide, but you only get the way America addresses it with the, everybody out there having a riot. You're like, but what happened? Am I supposed to infer from that the United States of America's collapsed and there's 6 teenagers restarting society and then humankind? Like that's, so I just, I didn't think
That's
that it was, yeah.
You got it.
It was
That's-
like
that
a
is
really good
actually
TV
it.
series with the shitty.
And how do you feel about that new utopia?
Impossible.
I don't
I
think he
thought
wrote it like a dystopian teen novel, and he ended it like a dystopian teen novel. So I was just annoyed by it.
Yeah, he even, in the book, he talks about all of the other efforts throughout American history to create utopias like the Oneida community. And, he mentions all of these, which I've studied all of those communities, and all of them failed. And so he makes the point of saying they all failed, and yet he ends the book with, and so here we go again. We're going to create another one now.
We're going to try again.
But I think maybe what we're supposed to assume is that these kids have some kind of awareness or understanding, because of their life experience, that they are going to do this differently. I wasn't sure about that, but I thought maybe if he's trying to interject any kind of hope at the end of the book, and I'm not convinced he was, that would be it, that these kids are going to somehow, they're going to, because of what they've been through, they're not going to let it happen again. And I thought that was another major theme in the book is why are all these people in America, in the United States, so unhappy? Why are there all of these insurrectionist groups and survivalist groups and all of these, the Boogaloo Boys and all of these? Why are these people so unhappy? They say they are unhappy because there is a system that has taken their individual freedom away from them. One of the main themes in the book is people wanting to get their individual freedom back. But when we look at what's going on in our country right now, those people are low information, even ignorant, uninformed people who don't know anything about history. And so all they want is to be they feel like victims. Somebody's victimizing them. And so they want to strike out and get their freedom back. Most of them have no idea what freedom they have in this country compared to the rest of the world, even right now. I mean, I've been in countries like Pakistan. They do not want they do not want what they think they want, because what they end up doing is flirting with autocracy and dictators.
Yes.
Because these autocrats and dictators make promises to them, and then they find out that they are more oppressed and subjective than they were before.
And isn't that what we're doing right now? Flirting with.
That's what so many
autocracy and
people in our
dictatorship.
country
Yeah.
are voicing right now, is we want our freedom. There's some system of oppression that's taking our freedoms away from us. And yeah, there are a lot of restrictions in this country, and there are a lot of limits on freedom, in this country, and not all of them are good. But I don't think these people who rush the Capitol, saying we got to overthrow the government so we can be free, they don't have any idea what they're playing with.
Yeah. Anybody would recommend this book to someone?
I can think of 2 or 3 people I would recommend it to.
They read
But
it.
just because I think they would be able to read it. To tell you the truth, it disturbed me.
Sure.
I had some
Yeah.
bad dreams, reading this book. This book was not easy for me to read at all. It was very disturbing.
It's too realistic, based on where we're at right now. It to me, it was like, wow, this could happen, to me, that's what it felt like.
I feel like it is happening.
Well, it is. I mean, not all of the
Except for
things
those-
that he did, but yeah,
Those 6 kids.
yeah.
I gave mine to my best friend, so I'm gonna be interested to see what she says.
There you go.
If she'll read it. But
Yeah.
Even after saying what I just said, I'm glad I read it. I'm
Yeah.
glad I read it.
But the disturbing part of it, Ken, is that why? Because it seems too real. It seems like it's too possible, some of it.
Yeah, I knew I was reading a novel, but I thought I could be reading today's newspaper.
Yeah.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the realism, I think, right, like I said, it's too current. We're still in the middle of the story.
Mhm.
I was camping a couple weeks ago, just an hour from my house, and I just get, 35, 40 minutes north of my house. I'm in Sussex County, New Jersey, and there's Trump 2024 flags.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And Kellyanne Conjob was on the CBS Morning News, and she's still preaching the same bullshit that when she was with Trump.
Well, Orwell said, the bigger the lie and the more often you tell it, the more likely people are to believe it.
Ugh.
Yes, Cicero said that, and Hitler too.
That's right. Yes,
In Mein
that's right.
Kampf. Yeah, and he got his playbook from Cicero, I believe.
That's what Trump's doing.
What a
You know,
lip.
in the middle of Trump's administration, I was out on Muskegon Lake where I grew up with 3 women friends of my sister's, Republicans. I knew that. Nice women, all college educated, all have raised children that are all college educated. And it was when the terrible things were going down on the border, and the children were being ripped from their mothers and all that. And I said to these women, I mean, I knew they were Trumpites, but I said quietly, now you gals are all mothers. I said, you can't, what do you think of what's going on there yesterday? What with those babies being torn? And they just all looked at me and said, those aren't real babies. That
Oh
was
my
a-
God.
that was the thing that was set up to make Trump look bad.
Oh,
They
no,
said, those are not real babies. That was staged.
no.
I mean, these were educated people who firmly believed that because they watched Fox News. That's what Fox News told them.
Yeah.
Cynthia, I know somebody personally, a friend of mine who was down there for 2 weeks volunteering. I mean, I know you believe it, but to have seen her photos and hear her stories and hear that people
Terrible.
didn't even think that was real. And I know other people who've just said, well, they shouldn't have come here. What do they think was going to happen?
And that's the apathy. That's the apathy that Cheryl was talking about earlier. The bigger the problem, the harder it is to be empathetic. I think one of the things he was saying about empathy and Michelle Obama is we can be empathetic when it's one person or 2 people and we think we can do something to help them. But when we're talking about masses of people, then our empathy turns into apathy.
Mhm.
And that's what was happening on the border with a lot of people.
I-
They
you know,
shouldn't be
just
here.
hurts
It's their
me.
own fault.
Yeah, I didn't have that vocabulary word for it, but I've said that about some people I know personally who I've said they would give the shirt off their back to a person they know. They would never treat a person they met with discrimination or racism, but put the question of the world in front of them. And I don't understand how they don't translate their personal behavior to the way they want things. But that's it, Ken. That's it exactly there. It's just the scope of it.
Yeah, the scope of it is really different, and it's not right in your face, your personal friend or your personal
Yeah.
acquaintance.
Well,
yeah.
and that's right. So in the book, right, that there is a bit where they think like, are these suicides even real? Are they really happening?
Mhm.
But,
Sure.
and that was, it relates to with the COVID deaths, people, were, oh no, they're not. I don't know. People say, I don't know anyone who died. Okay. I'm glad you don't.
Mhm.
But like, during COVID, do you think we ever would have taken the time to go protest and do everything they did about Black Lives Matter if everybody was working and stuff? I think like people are so busy with their job and come home and do all the stuff at home. We don't have time to care. We don't have time to, like I even remember reading books about the days when the country was being formed and how they were so active. And I thought, how do they have time to do that? Where's their other job? I think we've gotten to be focused on our GNP in the United States and
Yep.
Yeah. So the book
What's
made us
our
all
next
sad.
book?
Make the book what?
What's our
Made us
next
all
book?
sad. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's all
Sarah.
said, yes. So we need to talk about some different books then.
Yeah.
You think? All
Yeah.
right. Well, I brought a few because somebody said we need to have a few out there. You guys can certainly suggest some others, but Joby, do you have something that shows these ones that I brought?
Yep, hold on one second.
I pulled a few from I pulled 3 from the bestsellers lists, and then I pulled one from one that I'm reading currently, and one from that I told you about before about that my friend wrote. So this is one, The House We Grew Up In. They had a perfectly normal house and everything was going wonderfully in their family. And then one Easter weekend, something happened and it tore the family apart. And then they talk about what happens to the family afterwards and when they eventually return to the house. Next, A Column of Fire by Ken Follett. It's set in 1958. I know that some of you probably read his other books, and it talks about if one young spy can protect the queen. And what it really says is the real enemies aren't the religions. It's the battle that pitches those who believe in tolerance and compromise against the tyrants who would impose their ideas on everyone else. So, but this is set in 1958, so it's a interesting historical type of novel. Next, I didn't write very much about this.
I don't think you should read this one this time.
Okay, it's called The Woman Upstairs. It's a psychological thriller.
Next.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. Like, no.
This is an older book. It's even been made into a movie, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. And it's a kind of a spiritual saga. This kid, he's going through life. Everything's wonderful. He's a, world-class athlete and so on. But he's haunted by this feeling that something's missing from his life, as many of us are, right? And so he wanders into a gas station.
Socrates.
He meets Socrates. That's what he calls him. It's not real Socrates. And
That sounds good.
and then it's what happens to him afterwards. But it's a very it's a spiritual saga, like you said, but it's so there's some lessons associated within it, so it's that kind of book. And then the last one is this book that my friend wrote, Deadly Solution, a Maeve Malloy mystery by Keenan Powell. It's a legal procedural type of book. It's set in Anchorage, and it says in their mean streets.
I vote for. Which one do you vote for?
So anyway, those are the 5 I came up with.
So is that person Maeve Malloy? Does she write about her all the time?
Yeah, she's the lawyer in the book.
Oh,
So it's kind of one of those things where she does another book with Maeve Malloy in
Yeah.
another book. Yeah.
so does anyone else have one to suggest, or do we vote?
I like a couple of these. I don't know. I don't have anything else to add. I'm reading a crappy book right now, so I'm just pushing,
ones you're
slogging through it, waiting
like-
for the next recommendation here.
All right.
Kristen, you like a couple, but you're not gonna tell us what they are.
Oh, okay, I could, but that wasn't the question.
Fair point. Any thoughts, my friends? Because this is always the most interesting part of this session is your.
Or should we just vote?
What was the first one again? I'm sorry.
Let me flip through them again real quickly.
Yes.
So this is number 5 that Cheryl offered. Number 4 was The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Really a pretty cool book. I've actually read this one. Maybe I participate in the conversation. Who knows? But really a thought-provoking book. Wouldn't you say, Cheryl?
Yes.
I think it's on this table in front of me somewhere and I just can't find it. I have it.
Yeah, you might have it.
This is one of the ones that Michael Bernoff.
Yeah, I didn't read it
Yeah,
yet, but I have it.
yeah.
Very good. And again, when I say thought-provoking, it's also about being accepting in your life, being a little more zen about what's going on in your life, and just learning to be with rather than struggle against. Hence The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. This one, I don't think, Cheryl, what were you thinking after this book that you would offer a psychological thriller?
I don't know. I just threw it out there, man.
I would want to read it.
And then A Column of Fire by Ken Follett. Kind of a break in your style of what you've been reading. Kind of cool.
Well, we read books like this before, but not set back this far, I don't think. But yeah, we have in the
A few
50s.
World War
We have.
II
Yeah,
ones,
we have.
didn't we, at
Yeah,
one point?
we have. Yeah.
And then
So-
number 1 was The House We Grew Up In by Lisa Jewell. So I'm going to open the chat, and I think you should write down the number 1, the book you'd read in June.
We only get one choice.
You can get 2.
2 choices. Okay, I'm gonna put.
I just opened the chat, Barb, and it says Blame the Victim. I'm like, was that a book? We've got one for The Way of the Peaceful Warrior.
Deadly
Actually,
Solution?
let me
Yeah.
write this in here. Number 1 is House
Oh, I'll write it back out.
Grew Up In. Cheryl, you remember these? What were 2?
The House We Grew Up In. The second one's A Column of Fire.
2.
The third one's A Woman Upstairs, psychological. And the fourth one's Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And the fifth one is Deadly Solution.
Okay, so get my little ticky marks out here because we're nothing if not high tech over here at Sanctuary. And above Kristen, so way up here, I have Barb voting for Blame the Victim.
Barb! He's right, though. That was part of the conversation we were having at the time.
Warrior, Peaceful Warrior, and Deadly Solutions. Is that a
That was a book?
fire?
Oh, yeah. The
Peaceful
King of
Warrior,
Power.
Fire, House, and Deadly.
And that's a good idea, Kay. Can we pick for 2 or 3 months?
Oh, I see.
Do a
Oh,
couple
now
of them.
let's try to add more books next month. Instead of going from this list.
You got a
Oh,
piece-
add some more books. You'd rather wait and add some more books?
Yeah, because,
Okay.
yeah,
All right. Then you guys need to bring some books then.
I'll try very
Okay.
hard.
Okay, my friends, it looks like Deadly is 3. Okay, and Okay, this might be my count and it is not quality checked, but it looks like we have eight votes for Peaceful Warrior, 4 votes for Fire, 3 votes for Deadly Solution, and 1 or 2 for House. So it's pretty clear that if you want to do a July choice, you could do Peaceful Warrior.
That
And-
sounds good.
You could tee up Fire for August.
Well, this is for June, Joe, because this is May we're in right now, right?
Right.
I'm just,
Yeah,
I'm
wait.
living life fast, Cheryl. You're right. So let's
There you are. So,
thank you, Kay, for getting that. Okay, so let's go with Peaceful, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. Hold on here, I'll pull it back up.
and do you want to wait, you guys, and pick next time, or do you want to go ahead and do one more for July?
Let's revisit. Let's put our top ones back in the hat and bring more as well.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
Cheryl,
maybe our regulars that wasn't
Uh-huh.
able to come, they could voice their opinion, the ones that aren't here
Uh-huh.
tonight.
Okay.
Yep.
All
So
right. That sounds like a good book to read after the one we just read. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I
I
voted, yeah.
you're gonna
you know.
feel good about it. So then Cheryl, we'll go with Peaceful Warrior and we'll tee up. Fire had 4 votes.
Mine's already downloaded.
Tee up that one, and
The house we grew up in had only 1, interestingly, I think. Only
Deadly
1.
Solutions had 3.
Yeah,
Deadly Solutions had 3.
yep.
And that's actually a pretty easy read.
And the
Yeah,
woman
and-
upstairs had 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, Peaceful Warrior looks pretty short too, so that'll be good for summer. So like, I just
Yeah.
downloaded it. It's like 5 hours on
Yeah.
audio.
But it's
audiobook.
also quite thoughtful. It's like Kim was saying, the last book or the book before where you write it, it's not thoughtful dense, it's thoughtful. So you don't want to rush through it, it's a story. Yeah.
Okay, good. Good.
Yeah.
Like you want to get the book so you can make notes in the margin.
Well, hey, my friends, can I show you something real briefly?
Yes.
I give you a little tease here. I'm gonna stop my share. We're on summer schedule now, so the next time we're gathering, hold on here. The next time we're gathering is it's on Flag Day on June 14th.
Really? Wow.
Yep,
Okay.
Barb. Hold on here. I might have written these things down, or I might not. No, I didn't. Barb, what else? It's near Flag Day, and it's we had a whole bunch of days, national days.
Oh, gosh, it's, there were some
Some good ones.
really odd ones.
So what we're doing, my friends, is we are in contact, and we're still in the planning stages of doing something really different for June 14th. And there is a movie that is winning loads of all these international film festivals, and it's called Angels and Saints, Eros and Awe, or Eros and Awe, however you pronounce that. It is, as this one says, an eye-opening film with interesting speakers, lots of food for thought, reinforcing an enlightened, sex-positive perspective. And it's recommended by, again, Eastern Mountain Retreat Center, and a good friend of ours of Sanctuaries, of Ken and Tom's. Ken, what was the conference he was at?
It's Jeff Lutz, who's a couples therapist here in Austin, founded the Contemporary Couples Conference about 5 years ago, more longer than that now, about 8 years ago. And it's become a big national conference that's held here in Austin every year. And it was held last month here. And this film was shown at the conference. And Jeff Lutz is the therapist. And Jeff contacted me and said, I think your Tuesday evening people would really love to see this film. And he knows the writers, directors, producers, the people behind the film. And he said, I can get them on your Tuesday evening program, for your people to discuss the film with them if you would like to do that. And so that's we're just Joe has just begun this conversation with them about doing that.
What we're gonna be doing is there's another therapist said, I found the film very touching. I'm often confronted by the shaming of those who do not conform to religious norms of sexuality. Sex can become sacred when we remove the shame. It's a message of wholeness. And what we're thinking of doing, my friends, and this is you'll see a bunch of advertising on this, because we do really believe this could be interesting to a lot of parties beyond our regular Sanctuary Online folks. And we may send a link out to the actual movie. The film is 56 minutes long. And so you can watch it kind of at your leisure. And then our other idea is to also start Sanctuary Online 30 minutes early and actually Zoom it. So watch the movie together, but then that last half hour, depending on how many people we can get RSVPing, right, that can commit to coming, then we'll ask some of the filmmakers and some of the people that were in the film to actually join us for a conversation. So we're thinking it could be really, really, really cool. And we need to get it out as far as advertising. So once we get jumping on this, and you see it, maybe we send it all to y'all and far and wide, right? This is one of those things where we really can jump way beyond MCC into other religious or church communities that might be really interested, leaders that can just invite on. And so this is one of an opportunity for great programming, but also a great opportunity to meet some new people, introduce them to those of us here at Sanctuary Online, what we're doing, because we have an amazing plans for the fall as well. So loving your help. Loving you being here tonight. And Cheryl, last word, hon?
I just wanted two last words. One is put this in your things now. It's June 28th. We had some mix-ups as to when this was. It's going to be June 28th is our next book club. So that'll be the next book club, but this June 14th is what she's talking about. And go and look at what Barb wrote for all the things that June 14th is this year.
I saw that, Barb. That's pretty good.
It's pretty funny. I love it.
Dear God. But anyway, also, yeah, this will be, I put the link to the website, and on there's a 4-minute little video, like a short trailer that'll give you some perspective on the film. Okay. Check it out in the chat. And we are
International Bath.